Hello, this is Juan Marcos Barahona Gutierrez again. That's the 2nd of January, and we're continuing our series on crypto-Jews based on my book, Secret Jews, The Complex Identity of Crypto-Jews and Crypto-Judaism. And today I wanted to touch upon the first chapter of the book, which is titled The Rise of the Converso Problem. And the idea here is basically to set up the historical framework for this idea. And I do that by discussing quite extensively the history of Sephardic Jewry in the Iberian Peninsula, dating back to late antiquity. One of the things that I do is I avoid a lot of the legends and tales that are told, which are quite interesting and quite appealing sometimes, but the goal of the work is to be historical and academic, and so a lot of those references are not included because we cannot demonstrate that they're true. I do believe that Jews existed or lived in the Iberian Peninsula much earlier than the archaeological evidence and historical evidence provides, but since we're focused on what we can show, we have to stick to what we can actually use as proof. We have archaeological evidence from late antiquity during the Roman period, and also we have references from a council that was held in Elvira, a Christian council, from, I think it's 303, something like that if I remember, CE, that references the interaction between Christians and Jews. And one of the concerns was the social interaction, marriage, intermarriage between them, other issues that were in play. Christians were going to Jews so that Jews would bless their fields, so they would have a good harvest. In that sense, it's interesting because we see that they have quite a bit of social interaction. And when you have to put a rule in place or a law to prohibit something, it's quite clear that it's being practiced. So there was a lot of interaction between Jews and Christians. And then as we continue, we find that there's quite a bit of evidence as the Roman era ends and the era of the Visigoths begins. Now, you might remember, if you don't know, with the fall or the decline of the Western Empire, of the Western Roman Empire, there were groups of what we, in history class would call barbarians, basically Germanic tribes, Eastern tribes that migrated into the empire. And one of those tribes were the Visigoths and the Goths. And they eventually made their way into the peninsula, where they formed an independent kingdom for some time under the hegemony or under the overarching control of what was left of the Roman Empire in the West. But eventually they were pretty much an independent kingdom. When the Visigoths converted from Arianism or Arian Christianity to what we would call Chalcedonian Christianity or Western Christianity, Catholicism, for whatever reason, there was an abrupt change in how they dealt with Jews. There were a series of councils, church councils that were held, principally in Toledo, because Toledo was the capital of the Visigothic kingdom. And many of these councils over the series of decades and, in fact, centuries would reflect in many ways sort of the concerns that were stipulated in the Council of Elvira. Social interaction, Jews owning Christian slaves. Eventually, things would become so problematic that under Sisput, I believe it's 612, 613, if I can remember correctly, there was actually an edict given that all Jews would either convert to Christianity or leave. And according to a couple different sources, it seems that the majority of the Jewish population did convert. So that's interesting in and of itself because that's the first time that we have an edict of expulsion and we have what we would consider, at least I would consider, to be a forced conversion. And there's actually 3 within the history of what we would call Spanish Jewry. I guess you could count a 4th if you want to be technical about it with the what happens in Portugal later on. But in essence, we have a pattern here that develops and that is recurring. And according to one source, it's actually an Islamic source, about 90,000 Jews converted to Christianity. The problem, and of course this is the issue that we're going to see centuries later, is the sincerity of those conversions. The conversions themselves were done under duress, and so the fidelity of the people that have converted is questionable, and it is often non-existent. And what we see in the councils of Toledo is we see a recurring theme. The issue has to do with people who have converted, Jews who have converted, who continue to do what? They continue to observe Passover. They continue to circumcise their sons. They continue to eat, observe the laws of kashrut, the dietary laws, kosher laws, in some form or fashion, etc. And there's always this question that arises in the minds of the individuals who are the heads of the church, the fidelity and the integrity of the converts. Now, of course, if you force someone to convert, it's difficult to believe that they're going to wholeheartedly embrace their new faith. But this issue continues, and the fact that the councils continue to address this time after time after time shows that, to some extent, Visigothic control of the peninsula was rather limited, because if you have to keep issuing the same law over and over again, it shows that it's a recurring problem, and it shows that there are limitations in the ability of the court to legislate and to execute that legislation. So this issue continues for quite some time, and one of the things about Visigothic history in the peninsula is the reigns of the kings are very short. There's a lot of coups, I guess you could say. One king is killed, another comes up, he only reigns for a few years, he dies, somebody else takes over. There's a continual pattern of that, but most of them continue this approach to what are technically now Christians living in the peninsula. And sometimes they have to reiterate this issue of Jews not being permitted to live there. So either there is an influx of Jews from other areas, or even those who have technically converted and their descendants are reverting back to Judaism rather openly, which is sort of interesting. Now, this continues until we get to the to the end of the Visigothic era and the beginning of the Islamic era, with the invasion of Muslims from North Africa in 711. And so I think this is a good point to stop. But if you're interested, just continue to watch the videos. I'm going to put a little sign where you can sign up, subscribe. I think somewhere here, in the corner, it'll appear. And I'm going to do my best to continue this, to sort of, elaborate on why I write these books, why they're interesting. I haven't gotten really to the reason of the impact that they can have today, but I'm just trying to give you sort of an overview of what is included in the material itself. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave comments, and I might even put my contact information there for you to have that as a resource. And you can always visit Crypto-Judaism.com, which focuses in on Sephardic history, and specifically the history of forced converts, conversos, crypto-Jews, anusim in Hebrew.